Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at Final Fantasy XIV's patch 6.08 patch notes. For those of you who haven't been keeping up with the news, patch 6.08 is a balance change patch, meaning that a bunch of jobs that needed a little bit of help, some a little more than others, got a bit of a boost in potency and functionality. We were told these would largely be potency boosts and that any more major changes would be saved for patch 6.1, which we can guesstimate will be around the end of March or early April, coming with a slew of new content. Patch 6.08 also introduced the Oceanian Data Center. Yes, all of my Australian and New Zealand friends and everyone from that region finally have a data center all to themselves, and will probably be rapidly populating once it is actually online. Once the servers are back up, I should say. On top of that, the game's going to go on sale again, so it's going to be a bunch of new faces popping up again. We'll see about them queue times, though. Without further ado, though, let's check out those job changes. So let's just scroll down, and would you look at that? Battle system's one of the first things that we get to take a quick peek at. Now, first on the list, we have Paladin, a tank that a lot of people have wanted them to bring up a bit, just so it's more in line with some of the other tank DPSs. Now, the first two changes listed, Spirits Within and Expiation. Really only the Expiation one matters because it is the upgrade to Spirits Within. But I suppose at the lower levels and things like level 70 and 80 ultimates, you will have a slight increase to potency for them, which does of course help a lot, on top of the fact that they're already really good at level 70 dungeons to boot. Now, the big thing that it appears they're hitting is their Blade of Faith, Truth, and Valor combo. Basically your follow-up to Confiteor. I'm actually a little surprised to see them take this route, because while Paladin's rotation is once a minute, pretty solid, pretty set in stone, meaning you'll see these skills every minute, I expected them to take a more skill floor raised approach, meaning they would raise the potency of GCDs like Fast Blade, Riot Blade, even Goring Blade or Royal Authority, as opposed to going for these infrequent points of damage. For reference, I believe Blade of Faith, Truth, and Valor currently make up about just under 5% of Paladin's overall DPS, all combined. And Expiation is actually a decent bit above that, I think somewhere in like the 4% range. But adding all this potency, of course, is going to change what its overall percentage of damage that the Paladin deals is. And they are not subtle changes. Blade of Faith was changed to 420 potency, which is the same as Blade of Valor's base potency before the buffs. 170 potency added on. That is like a 70% potency increase. And we see that reflected across the board with the rest of these. About a 60% potency increase with Blade of Truth, and about the same with Blade of Valor, making the combo much more valuable, and also much more valuable inside of burst windows. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Paladin, an opener that has become very frequently used is to pop Fight or Flight, I think about 19 or 20 seconds before a fight begins, and then you also lead with a Holy Spirit, you quickly go into Goring Blade, you do a short Request Cat window, and then you apply Blade of Valor within the damage buff window of the entire party. That is almost assuredly going to be the way this goes, and I don't know how that impacts Paladins across entire fights or in the long run, but you're going to be seeing that opener a lot more, the pre-pull Fight or Flight opener. So not really sure how this is going to shape up, as I am not a tank main myself. However, at the very least, you're going to feel a lot better when you press those buttons once a minute. Now, what? Tomahawk had its potency increased from 100 to 150. Okay, I mean, I'm not gonna say no to that, but cool. Maybe they're trying to make it more worth during downtime. Maybe they just want the initial pull aggro to have a better multiplier for Warrior for some reason. I don't know, but there you go, 50 potency for Warrior. There you go. Monk buffed? Really? That's brave. Monk was already doing really freaking well. And now Phantom Rush is 150 potency. He just buffed it by 15%. I mean, I really thought the Monk thing was a typo when we were reading the previews, like Yoshi P talking about this at that radio show, but Monks, there you go. Every 2 minutes, you're going to get a better Phantom Rush. All right, cool. Dragoon. So I noticed Dragon Sight's on here. Range has been extended from 12 yalms to 30. You know, after the Fey Union tether change, I've seen a lot of Dragoons asking for this. So that's pretty receptive of them. Oh, it now no longer is like they don't need to stay within the 12 yalms to receive the effect. I mean, that makes sense given that they raised it to 30 yalms. But it also says that oh no, it doesn't have a tether anymore. So it's a TLDR. This is still going to be annoying to use. You're still probably going to be macroing this skill, but it is going to be effective at a wider range, which is really, really good for mechanics that split the team up during burst windows. I know that some standard spreads where the DPS are in the intercardinals, during certain mechanics, it can be kind of annoying to drag and sight certain people. This is going to eliminate that issue, so improves usability to some degree, but it's still going to be kind of a tedious ability to use just because of the nature of actually selecting the target. But overall, still a nice change. And then on top of that, just looks like potency changes across the board. Stardiver getting 120 potency is pretty big for your life windows. Rain and Thrust, just every time you come back around to that, it's another 20 potency. Heaven's Thrust, that's actually going to be really nice, the Heaven's Thrust buff, because you're going to be life surging that almost every time after the opener. So that's going to, of course, get that extra crit multiplier, which means the potency change is a little more significant than just the 50. That'll play out every time you get through that combo, but when you get those life surges, it's going to be that extra bit little special. On top of that, Chaotic Spring just having its base potency and its its base potency and its rear combo potency increase. Realistically, you only care about the rear combo potency increase, but in the case you can't get to the rear, it's 20 more potency either way. Ninja. Oh, would you look at this? So these are the types of changes I expected for Paladin. These are what I like to call raising the skill floor. These are skills that even the most inexperienced and unpracticed ninja are using. Spinning Edge, Gust Slash, Aeolian, and Armor Crush. Them all getting potencies across the board for their flank attack potency and their combo potencies and whatnot. This just makes every ninja stronger without them having to really adjust their gameplay in any capacity. And then Hyosho Ranryu being stronger, I mean, that's just a burst tool, and that having more potency is going to feel good. This should just be a nice little boost, kind of the same as Dragoon, but Dragoon having the extra functionality with the Dragon Sight. So this should bring both of the two melee DPS that I think needed a little bit more help up a decent bit without having to really adjust the way you play much at all. This looks like Samurai got similar changes. Hakaze, Jinpu, Shifu. Ogi Namikiri and Keishi Namikiri getting buffs make those a lot more important inside of buff windows, because you really need to be making sure those are on point more than you even were already. And it was already among the most important skills that you could fit. Because of those potency increases, though, that really gives them a high priority. So Ninja's going to be seeing just potency increases across the board. Should feel good. And that brings all the melees up a little bit. I'm just really still surprised to see Monk actually got like that tiny potency buff to Phantom Rush. Oh well. Machinist, looks like they're hitting all their hardest hitting abilities. Drill, Air, Anchor, and Chainsaw. Now, I haven't looked at their total percentage damage. I guess I could pull that up real quick. I'd have to find, it's probably not worth trying to do right now, just going through FF logs to try and find a decent one to do a comparison with. But effectively, that's 100 potency a minute, 3 drills. Well, I guess it's, I mean, on average, it's 3. Your opener, it'll be 4 drills, because you'll use it at 0, 20, 40, 60. So, and then Air Anchor you use at 0, 40, so that's another 20. Yeah, so actually it really ends up being more like 160 in the initial minute, and then after that, it's the calculations don't work out to be quite the same. But that's a pretty significant amount. The big thing is that these are also skills that you'll be using reassemble on. So you will, once, every 55 seconds or during your 2 minutes, you will be getting that extra crit multiplier on top of that increased potency. Is that enough? Yeah, that's probably enough to put Machinist in an okay spot, but I think Machinists are really still going to be looking for additional changes in point 1. Mostly to functionality, of course, like things like Hypercharge, but I wouldn't be surprised for people to try to push the potency a little bit further just because of how strong Bard is. But I will say this, Machinist, a great party finder option for the range physical role, just because it's so self-dependent. If you're really good on it, you can actually hard carry party finder DPS checks, especially through P1 and P2. So this is only going to make that better. It's way better of a party finder job now than it was before, and people playing it in static scenarios will also just feel a little bit more power, make their lives a good bit easier. Now, Dancer is the range physical job that, as I've said, needed Jesus. And these changes are a little hard to judge. So I'll start from the bottom up. Technical finish, first and foremost, getting potency. Just nice for their 2-minute windows, for the burst windows. So There isn't really too much else to say about that. Really, the big changes come in Cascade, Fountain, Reverse Cascade, and Fountain Fall. For those who aren't too in tune, these are their single target abilities, the unprocced ones and the procced ones. Now, when you look at all of them, it's 40 potency to every single one of them across the board. And that is pretty significant given that out of every 2 minutes you're playing the job, these are basically every single GCD you are using. So when it comes to something like Cascade, I mean, that's an over 20% increase to that one GCD. And then with Fountain, it's, you know, percentage-wise, it's a bit less, but there's just 40 potency. Almost every GCD that is outside of your burst window in a 2-minute is going to be anywhere from about 12% to just like 23, 24% more than it was before. And you know what? Looking at the actual difference between a dancer and a bard and a machinist, that's actually gonna be pretty significant. Is it enough? I'm not confident enough to say that right off the top of my head. But taking a quick look at the medians here, let me see if I can pull up a proper median listing since, you know, I don't really have all the right things set up here. I'm also not too used to using FF logs, but I do have it up on the other monitor. Where is it? Savage, all bosses. Is this it? Well, I mean, those are the bosses, but I would really like to get the actual DPS and whatnot. Damage, yeah, I just keep getting the medians and quartiles, so I'm just going to leave that for the time being. Oh, no, per second amounts. Here we go. So Dancer's median across the entire tier is about 6.7k, and Bard's median across the board is about 7.05. So if you add another, you know, 10 to 20% on top of all of their base filler GCDs, that brings up the overall average. It's going to be close. I think Dancer will feel better to be using inside of and just in raids overall, but I still think people are going to lean towards Bard and Machinist, and I'm not 100% sure that Machinist is going to be in a spot where they're 100% content looking at the numbers here. But that's one of those things that no matter how much you try to judge it based on vacuum math, you gotta get in the game and try it out yourself. So I will come back to you with that probably in the form of a versus style video for the range physical role. Black Mage, a lot of incidental damage increases, really trying to push making sure you are not a Paradox Mage. Fire 4 getting a 10 potency buff is actually incredibly significant for Black Mage, because Fire 4 Black Mages realistically have still been the way to go, but they are trying to solidify that. They also increase Xenoglossy, which increases the value of keeping Enochian up by a considerable amount, and also increases the value of your Amplifier skill, especially for your burst windows and making your movement that much more valuable. You really want to try to balance Xenoglossy's for movement and Xenoglossy's inside of buffs, and try to make those coincide whenever you possibly can, because those potency increases are significant. That's going to feel very good for Black Mage. And then Summoner. I don't know that this was the answer to what we needed. So Astral Impulse, 10 potency more. That is your GCD during Bahamut. Fountain of Fire is your GCD during Phoenix, which also just got buffed. This is just to make sure that Phoenix is still not weaker than Bahamut, a change they already made. This trying to kind of double down and make sure that, yes, Phoenix is still stronger than Bahamut, which makes your level 80 skill stronger than your level 70 skill. Just doesn't line up with all your 2 minutes, which is still a weird design. But Ruby Wright only going up 20 potency. You know, the summoner buffs they got with Phoenix were fairly substantial. Even looking at the numbers right now, they're not that far behind Red Mage in regards to their overall damage. This is going to put them pretty much exactly in line with Red Mage. In some encounters, it may even push them ahead. But it still feels like something's missing. You know, I'd rather see more power shifted into Ruby Wright, because it just doesn't feel good enough to have that slow phase. You know what I mean? So this buffs a little bit of your hypermobile phases, which is 90% of Summoner anyway. And then also mildly buffs your less mobile phase. So, and 0.1, seeing 0.1 Summoner, because I have a feeling they're not done with adjustments for you. For PvP, it looks like they just gave them the Dragon Sight change. It's something similar, at least, no longer required to stay within 15 yalms, and the channeling animation between the Dragoon and the target's been removed. Yeah, so they just made it like a placeable buff, like they did in PvE, but they didn't like increase the range. I guess it doesn't make mention of the 30 yalms or anything like that, but more functional. The Oceanian Data Center, these are all just kind of the things they've been talking about as of late. They're adding the Oceanian Data Center with 5 servers, as you can see here, in case you didn't know. Bismarck, Ravana, Sephiroth, Sophia, and Zervan all of the Heavensward Trials that we have there. The home world transfer to a world designated as New World will now apply a double EXP bonus till 80. This is something we had already, but they're just reestablishing that it is here. The following setting has been added to the system configuration. Enable DualSense DualShock 4 functionality. DirectX 11 must be enabled to access this feature. So in PC, you can now get the DualShock and DualSense functionality of the DualShock 4 controller. And on top of that, enabling immersed spatial audio from the sound setting tab will now disable equalizer mode as well. Turning it off will automatically reactivate it. Now, as for resolved issues, some audio crackling issues. The Proto Omega and the Dungeon Stigma Dreamscape were in the guided missile and chemical missile did not select targets correctly. Phantom, Kaimaichi, and Constellation could be dragged from the actions list into the actions and traits menu. Thin Air was not applied instantly to cast spells executed immediately after acting Thin Air, so Thin Air wasn't being consumed by the right abilities. Enhanced Arcane Crest was incorrect. The description was incorrect. These are, looks like some of these are descriptions. Some of these are just overall effects that were a little bit bugging out. And then fixing an issue with certain things like group poses and the transporting status and some NPCs and whatnot. There's other various issues that are here, but nothing too major was fixed. The Thin Air change for PvE, one of the more important things that they needed to fix, just because there's definitely times where that's going to come into play. Some known issues: an issue where enabling the spatial audio were in the setting to equalize the voice boost result in audio levels lower than other equalizer settings. Definitely heard people talking about that. An issue where in times display for the jumbo cacpot drawing were incorrect on the Oceanian data centers. This is a problem only Oceania has. But then they just clarify that this does not affect the actual lottery drawing, and it only affects the time display. Either way, these changes, good hold me overs for a lot of jobs. Definitely going to be checking out Paladin and the range physical jobs myself, and some decent buffs, especially for the melee roll across the board. Changes not on this list that I think desperately need to get into the game as soon as possible. We just had our healer State of the Realm with Momo and Midna, and we brought up White Mage. They need to make it so the lilies have damage parity. Or they have their damage neutral, I should say, just like some of the other healer skills that we've had. Currently, using a Lily is a DPS loss, whereas the other skills like Numa and Microcosmos are damage neutral on one target and damage gains in AoE. The Lilies are a little bit too fragile when it comes to that, and so I think that we agreed they really need to adjust those and probably buff the potency of Misery or something in that capacity. Also, probably giving them a little bit more MP on a size. That was Momo's suggestion altogether. Astro, still looking at button bloat fixes, just reducing the amount of just too many things for Astro to be juggling, especially every 2 minutes. It's just chaos, chaos, chaos. And then, what else? I guess they could make some other changes. There are things scholars and sages are indeed asking for, but they're performing so well that it probably isn't high on our priority list. And those are probably the biggest things that I can think of off the top of my head. Of course, everyone looking at Dark Knight and still wondering if it's going to be our classic 0.1 rework. But I guess we'll just have to wait till the next letter from the producer live and find out then. But with that, that's going to be a wrap for my overview of patch 6.08. Let me know what you thought about the buffs and job changes in the description, and if you're going to be making a character on the OCE data center, if you finally get to go and play a much less lag experience over in the Oceanian region. But thank you for watching. I'll see you all in the next video, and until then, take care.